Hello, and welcome to Roz's Random Ramblings. I am Roz, and today my ramblings will focus on answering the question, why is Korean food so spicy? Before that, you might be wondering why the change to the intro song. Two reasons mainly. First, this song, which was composed by John Beckwith, is a modern translation of a Chinese poem from the Tang Dynasty. This does not mean the drink, though I still fondly remember it from childhood. Did anyone else like Tang? Can you still get it anywhere? Anyway, the Tang Dynasty was a period in Chinese history that lasted about 200 years, from 618 to 907. And though today's episode is about Korea and not China, the two nations have some shared history, as you'll soon hear. And the second reason for using this song is that this recording is of my sister singing. If you listened to the first episode, you may recall that she didn't care for my theme song, so I'm using a song she sang. John Vickers also recorded this song, but I kind of like my sister's version better. I only played part of it at the beginning here, but I'll play the whole thing at the very end of the podcast, in case you want to hear it all. Bonus? She let me use it for free. Although, if I ever make money off this podcast, she might start charging me. Good luck with that. As for Korean food being spicy, I feel like the first thing I have to explain is that Korean food actually is spicy. I say this because I've tried a number of Korean foods here in Canada, especially things sold in grocery stores and restaurants as Korean food, and something I've noticed is that they're rarely authentically spicy. Savory, yes, and sometimes weirdly sweet, but not spicy. While not all Korean food is spicy, some forms of Korean barbecue, for example, are quite savory. Koreans will tell you that, as a general rule, they like their chili pepper, gochu, in all kinds of dishes. Kimchi, barbecue, soup, noodles, stews, rice dishes, almost anything can have some form of gochu in or on it. Koreans like to joke that their food is color-coded. The redder it is, the spicier. Quick aside, you may have noticed that I often spell words, especially if they're in foreign languages, but I mainly do that with languages that already use a Roman-based alphabet. Korean has its own alphabet, which I'll mention again later, but I find that trying to spell Korean words with the Roman alphabet is confusing, inconsistent, and imprecise. I prefer Korean letters, but since most of you probably don't know the Korean alphabet, I'll just say the words without spelling them. Back to the chili pepper, and some Korean music while we're at it. Gochu mainly comes in two different forms. One is powder form, known as gochugaru, which is used in many dishes, but probably most famously in kimchi, a well-recognized symbol of Korea's national identity. Kimchi really is an impressive food. Most times you'll see it served on its own as a side dish, but it can also be incorporated into many soups and main dishes. I recommend frying it with rice and either tofu or tuna. So simple, yet so delicious. The other form gochu takes is gochujang, which is a thick paste that is more often used in soups and sauces, or as a side, like at a Korean barbecue. One of my favorite dishes that uses gochujang is tteokbokki, which is frequently served as a street food. It's thick rice cakes served in a spicy sauce and usually comes with a boiled egg or fish cakes or dumplings. And if I was in a really naughty mood, I'd get them to throw in some tempura. So fattening, but heaven. I realize now that there's something else I should explain, and that's Korean rice cakes. In North America, we tend to think of rice cakes as those dry, crunchy things that we eat as diet food when we're desperate to make ourselves suffer and hate food. However, Korean rice cakes, which are called tteok, are anything but a diet food. They're these soft, gooey cylinders of a dense, sticky, non-sweet kind of cake made with rice flour. Hard to explain, lovely to eat. They show up in a lot of dishes, probably most commonly in tteokbokki, but non-spicy dishes as well. Personal humorous aside, while Koreans love their spice, many Koreans feel that this is something unique to their culture and that others, especially Westerners, do not like spice as much. This can lead to hilarious situations. Once, I wanted to order one of my favorite dishes, bibimbap, which is rice mixed with various vegetables and a spicy sauce incorporating gochujang. I went to one of the local food stands, not exactly a restaurant, but not street food either, more like an old-fashioned diner maybe. Anyway, I went in and asked the lady who clearly ran the place for some bibimbap, and she said no. I was like, excuse me? I hadn't been in Korea for a super long time and hadn't run into such a refusal before, but I'm Canadian, so I politely asked again, pointing to a picture of bibimbap on the wall menu in case I'd said it wrong, and she again said, "Año," no. She then pointed to a picture of a completely different dish, one that I had never tried before, but that was an almost clear broth with slices of tteok, very white, and according to Korean color coding, no spices whatsoever. I tried to tell her I liked bibimbap. "좋아해, 진짜, I like it, really." But she shook her head, pointed again to the soup, then walked away and made it. The dish I wound up eating is called tteokguk, and was a delicious option since I apparently couldn't be trusted to eat the spicy bibimbap. Not the last time I had it. Back to the spicy food. Koreans definitely like their gochu, but it's not exactly native to Korea. In fact, the hot peppers it evolved from originated in South America and didn't arrive in Korea until the 16th century. How did they get introduced to Korea and wind up becoming so popular that they are now a major part of the national identity? Several stories get bandied about, but in order to understand them better, you need to get to know a little more about Korea and why it is sometimes called the shrimp between two whales, and other times the hermit kingdom. Also, the land of morning calm, although personally, I think that's just because most stores there don't open until 11 a.m. How's your world geography knowledge? If you're not already familiar with where Korea is, it would be helpful to get a world map out right now. Korea is pretty easy to find. First, look for China, then Japan. Between China and Japan is a sizable peninsula, and that's Korea. If you're looking at a modern map, you'll see that peninsula divided into two parts, North and South Korea. Those are different political entities that exist at the current time, but all of the people who live in the two countries call themselves Korean, and for the most part don't separate their cultures, only their politics. One or two dishes may differ, but North and South generally call their food Korean food, which is how I'll refer to it, especially since the political divide is less than a century old, while Korean gochu has been around for about 500 years. Anyway, being a little country with China on one side and Japan on the other is an intimidating prospect for sure. I mean, here in Canada, we have the US next door, but apart from a few historical clashes and recent calls for Canada to become the 51st state, we've had relatively peaceful and mostly profitable interactions with our powerful neighbors downstairs. Not so Korea, which had to develop its own distinct culture over the millennia to spite its two powerful neighbors, certainly not because of them. After all, having a strong sense of culture gave Koreans some form of resistance from all of the invasions. And there were many invasions, especially from China. I mentioned a few theories regarding how gochu got to Korea, so it's time to dig through some history. Gochu is believed to be a member of the very large and highly varied Capsicum annuum group, which I'll mostly refer to as capsicum to make my life easier. Other members of the capsicum family include, in order of most spicy to least, chiltepin, or bird's eye pepper, Thai, cayenne, serrano, Hungarian hot wax, jalapeno, chipotle, poblano, Anaheim, banana, and bell peppers. Gochu belongs somewhere in the spice range of jalapeno and chipotle. This list also gives you an idea of the range of capsicum, which is literally worldwide. Capsicum originated in the Americas, most likely Mesoamerica, over 7,000 years ago, and was cultivated primarily in Mexico over 6,000 years ago. By the time Christopher Columbus first brought capsicum back to Spain in 1493, the indigenous people of the Americas had been cultivating it since Europe's Neolithic Revolution, meaning it's been cultivated for as long in the Americas as wheat and barley have been in Europe. Let that sink in. Before peppers hit Europe, the most common hot spice there was, well, pepper. Black pepper, that is. Fun fact. Peppers from the Americas got the name pepper because Europeans assumed they had discovered a new route to Asia and that, therefore, everything they found was just a variation of something they had already seen. This is why the indigenous people of the Americas were called Indians for so long, and this is also why capsicum was, and still is, called pepper, even though South American peppers are not related to black peppers. Following its initial introduction to Europe, capsicum was grown as an ornamental plant, but it didn't take long for it to be adopted as food. Another fun fact: If you listened to the last couple of podcasts, you'll recognize this music as my European monk music, and yes, once again, I'm going to talk about monks. Because, while Portuguese and Spanish explorers were the first to bring capsicum to Europe and eventually trade it east, the monks were the ones who mainly convinced people to use it in cooking. That's because monks recognized capsicum as a cheap alternative to black pepper, which probably sounds crazy today. Black pepper is as ubiquitous as salt, but both pepper and salt used to be a lot more expensive. I'll talk about salt in a future episode, but the thing with black pepper is that it can only be grown in tropical climates, and unlike today, where world trade can occur by the tons within days, getting black pepper in even small amounts took months. However, capsicum can be grown literally anywhere. I mean, I live in southern Alberta, and garden centers here sell all kinds of plants in the capsicum family, but no black pepper plants. And monks quickly realized the hot peppers could be dried, ground into flakes, and used as an inexpensive seasoning alternative to black pepper. Thus, hot pepper became popular among the poor folk of Europe, which actually helped it to spread quickly. Those monks and their cuisine, prolific preparers of fine foods. So now we have capsicum spreading all over Europe and into other areas of the world through trade routes. The Portuguese were the main exporters, which makes sense since they were the first to import it from the Americas after 1492. From Europe, hot peppers rapidly spread east, hitting India around the mid-1500s and entering China and Japan sometime around the 1570s. And from there, capsicum somehow entered Korea. But here's the thing. No one knows exactly how capsicum got to Korea. You might expect that it got there from the same Portuguese traders who were circulating their spices all over Southeast and East Asia, but Korea was notoriously resistant to Western traders, thus earning it the moniker the Hermit Kingdom in 1882. Most sources agree that the hot peppers that would eventually become gochu arrived in Korea from either Japan or China. The most widely accepted theory is that capsicum was introduced by Japan during one of their invasions of Korea, specifically the Imjin War, which was waged from 1592 to 1598. The hot pepper was originally called Japanese pepper, and therefore viewed with some skepticism by the isolationist nation, but was fully adopted into Korean cuisine in less than a century and has remained a staple ever since. However, if you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed that I said it could possibly have come from China as well. The main evidence for this comes from Japanese documents during that same Imjin War I mentioned before, where soldiers refer to stealing something called korai kosha, or Korean pepper, which has led some to speculate that capsicum arrived earlier. This theory is mostly downplayed though, primarily because it doesn't offer a route by which China introduced the peppers. China invaded Korea a lot, so it could have occurred during one of those wars, but none of the historical records show new spicy foods after any of those incursions. Also, Korean pepper could be interpreted in a lot of ways. Korea did have some spicy foods before the 15th century after all, just not gochu. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a third theory, even though this one is widely discredited outside Korea, and that theory states that gochu arrived in Korea millions of years ago, deposited by birds. The theory states that birds couldn't taste the spiciness of the seeds, so I assume the seeds were transported in their bellies and left behind in their droppings. This theory maintains that Korean gochu therefore did not arrive from South America in the 15th century and is not a member of the capsicum family, but is its own independent genus. Supporting evidence includes the fact that gochujang is apparently mentioned in writings about Korean medicine before the arrival of capsicum, suggesting that gochu must have already been in Korea before the Imjin War. If you do a quick online dive into this theory, you can catch a lot of criticism of it, for some obvious reasons. If this theory is accurate, then why was the arrival of capsicum annum in Asia 500 years ago so remarkable? Wouldn't comparable hot peppers have already evolved throughout Asia, likely also carried by birds with similarly indiscriminate bathroom practices? Yet no evidence exists for such a pattern of spicy species dispersal. Additionally, those early mentions of gochujang are not easily interpretable, with many historians pointing out that ancient recipes did not include gochu, but other ingredients. Plus, capsicum clearly evolved almost as quickly as it spread, with different areas rapidly developing local derivatives, like Thai chili. So gochu developing its own characteristics within decades should be no surprise. Unfortunately, people online complain about how Koreans always have to be different from everyone else and are always carrying on about Korean exceptionalism, and in their whining, the critics completely miss the point. Yes, Koreans are known for Korean exceptionalism, for very good reason. Remember at the beginning where I said Korean culture survived despite constant Chinese and Japanese invasions? They did that by focusing on the exceptional elements of their culture, like their love of gochu. And there are plenty of other amazing aspects. Their alphabet is a prime example. One of their kings, Sejong the Great, created the Korean alphabet himself specifically so the people would no longer be dependent on the Chinese writing system. It's a brilliant alphabet, and in my opinion, the only way you can read Korean words properly. The fact that Koreans would want to create a story about their favorite food flavoring to reflect their distinctive identity should therefore be no surprise. It's part of what makes them unique. Don't knock it, embrace it. Humorous Korean aside. I once got a free tour of Oahu given by a Korean tour guide who was a friend of a friend. The tour guide was actually a university student who made extra money by doing these tours, mostly for Koreans, which was the group I was with. One stop on the tour was a shrimp shack, which are abundant on Oahu, and before the Koreans went to order, the tour guide strongly warned the group that while one of the menu options was spicy shrimp, they should not order it, even if they like spicy foods, because the spice is very different from Korean gochu and they won't like it. After we got our food and sat down, the tour guide told my friend and I that on literally every Korean tour, at least one person would order the spicy shrimp because they love spicy food and would later bring it to the tour guide to say they couldn't eat it. Sure enough, not 5 minutes later, a sheepish young Korean man brought his plate of shrimp and told the tour guide he couldn't eat it. It was too spicy. I admit that I tried one, and though shrimp isn't my favorite flavor, I don't recall tasting shrimp or anything else for at least half an hour after I ate that one shrimp. Who eats something that's spicy? So, yeah, Korean food is spicy, but it's a very particular form of spicy. A Korean form. We've come to the part where I have to answer the question, why is Korean food so spicy? And the answer is because the Korean spice gochu is a unique element of their culture that they embrace as part of their national identity. In 500 years, they have created a variety of capsicum anum that has its own smoky, spicy flavor and makes many of their dishes distinctive and delicious, especially kimchi and tteokbokki and bibimbap. Man, I miss Korean food. Next episode, I thought I'd tell some humorous and non-food related stories about another place where I lived, Iowa, in the US. Well, I might have to mention corn, but that's not much of a food crop anymore. I have a few different questions to answer about Iowa, which I'll list next episode, but for now, I'll just say the general question is going to be, what's the deal with Iowa? Something to look forward to. This has been Roz's Random Ramblings. Each episode is researched, written, and produced by me, Roz Hirsch, because it's the kind of thing I like doing. The following is a list of music I used in this episode. The intro song was On a Rainy Night, composed by John Beckwith and sung by my sister, Laura Lee Werfel. I will put the entire song right after the credits, as promised, in case anyone wants to hear the whole thing. It's very lovely. The remaining songs came from the website epidemicsound.com. These include Milyang Arirang, which is playing now, performed by Kim Bok-young, who also did 3 other Korean songs I used for most of the Korean bits. These were Chongson Arirang, Chunmong, and Taepyeongga, all of which are also available on Spotify in case you'd like to hear more from Bok-young Kim. It should also be said that Arirang is another part of the Korean identity. Sandman by Mike Franklin, which was near the beginning of the episode. A Quirky Creature by Guto Lucena, which played during some of the funny bits. O Canada by National Anthem Works, hopefully you recognized the few seconds I played that. Where Do We Go Now by Arvid Svenningsson, which has become my go-to monk song because I can't find any good ones with chanting. And finally, Kailua Beach Park by Paper Twins, which played during the funny Hawaii story about spicy shrimp. Lots of shrimp in this episode. I release new episodes every Monday at noon, Mountain Daylight Time. More provinces have been switching to permanent daylight savings time, so hopefully I won't have to distinguish that soon. And as always, thanks for listening. You ask me when I'm gone.
I dream of your mountains and autumn pools, brimming all night with the rain. When shall we be dreaming weeks again? Together in your western